Tell me about your time of teaching preaching.
I had two experiences teaching. I taught 3 years at my alma mater, Union, and then 10 years at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta. Both very different. Most of my students, I had African American students and European students at Union. Most of my students at ITC were African American. You know, it was different at Union because the African American students, and this is the case with, I find this to be the case with African Americans and students from other ethnicities, is that, you know, the kids who come to you from the black church, they preaching. You know, they've already preached. They've gotten affirmation from the congregation. They've gotten offerings. You know, So when they come to the classroom and you start trying to correct them, you know, you use the red pen and writing it. So you have a challenge there. You know, you have a challenge. But students from other ethnicities, most of my white students, had never preached. They would, you know, they didn't know it. They wanted to be a preacher. They were taking preaching because it was required. They were open to what you taught, and you know, so you could they kind of absorb differently. Now that wasn't to say that the African American students weren't absorbing, but it was different because, like I say, if they had come from church on Sunday where they had auntie and grandma and the pastor standing up shouting, it was hard for you to say that's really not a good sermon. And then, like I say, especially if they had received a check, they gave me a big honorarium, so how can you tell them? So, but we taught them introduction. I basically had to go with the curriculum that was established at Union. At ITC, I basically wrote the preaching curriculum. So I was able to do preaching as social commentary, which is a very exciting course for me. I did women's ways of preaching, which was my way of getting them to think, womanist ways, womanist homiletics. Of course, they had to take intro and then intermediate. And so I had one course that I was very, very pleased with was the preacher as person. And so that was a very good course. And I had a very good, both at Union and ITC, I felt I had a very good rapport with all my students. Not 100%, you can't reach everybody, but it was exciting for me because when I began to see how very serious students look at the professor and how they'll begin to either mimic or imitate the professor, that was another level that I went to. I said, wow, I said, because these people, some of the things they're going to do in the pulpit will be things that they either saw me do or heard me do or heard me teach. So that was another point of maturity for me. But ITC was a very good, again, it was challenging because I had 6 different denominations. Mm-hmm. So you had to wonder if, you were the homiletical methodology was able to impact. And for the most part, I think it was. And where it wasn't, they would tell you that our denomination requires this, our denomination. And that's why I never, one of the things that was very important for me, for all my students, was to stay within your denomination and to use your own preaching voice. You know, I mean, you know, if you're, whatever your preaching voice is, you know. And so we got along well once that was established, that I was not trying to make them into other than they were. But I also wanted to make sure they understood who they were. So I required a lot of writing, to which they complained vociferously. This is a preaching class, why we had to do all this writing? I said, well, because it's an important discipline.
Yeah, it is.
It's an important discipline that allows you to organize your thoughts. Because if it's not, you know, if you can't put it down on paper, it's not going to become automatic when you begin to speak it. I mean, if words are jumbled and you don't know how you're going to say them, they're not going to become fluid when you open your mouth. So I made my students write a lot and read a lot. And some of the books, many of the books they read were not books on preaching. I had them read, you know, I introduced them to James Baldwin, Toni Morrison. I was somewhat surprised that they got through, you know, that they could get to the graduate level without having been exposed to them. But they just weren't.